Hello and welcome to the RevOps Show. I am super excited for this episode because Doug and Jess are exploring more behavioral science concepts. This time, each term is connected to the decision-making process. They're going to be walking through the concepts of chunking, decision fatigue, decision staging, elimination by aspects, decision inertia, and substitution. You'll hear what each item is and how it pertains not only to RevOps, but the bigger picture overall of our everyday lives. So with that in mind, let's get started.
Jess.
Doug.
We did it. We're doing it.
Twice in 1 week. I know. I can't believe it. I surprised myself.
This is like a RevOps Show palooza.
This is a great week for you, isn't it?
Jess, any week that I get to talk to you is a great week.
So that's every week. Every week's a great week for you, unless I'm on vacation.
Except when you desert me.
When I desert you.
You call it vacation, I call it desertion. Yep. Yeah, so don't you think that our the upcoming conference for RevOps Show, shouldn't we call it the RevOps Palooza?
The upcoming conference for RevOps Show? What are you talking
about? Yes, our growth team was supposed to listen to the episode, and they were supposed to have that response.
Sorry.
I mean, you know, I'm not going to lie, you're just taking a lot of my fun away.
That's what I do on a daily basis, though. It's my job.
Yeah, holy cow. You know, I almost feel like I should play a song. I should play like your favorite song for that.
God.
But instead,
clear eyes, full hearts.
Can't lose.
That's what I'm talking about. Actually, I can't remember what this one is.
It's time to get things started on the most sensational, inspirational celebration.
We haven't done that one in a while.
No, we haven't. We haven't done it in so long I couldn't remember what it was.
Oh, it's Friday, folks. It is Friday.
It is late on a date in Friday. What are you doing this weekend, Jess?
Getting ready for school, for my kids to go back to school.
I was going to say, this is an exciting weekend for you, isn't it?
It is an exciting weekend.
I mean, what lies on the other side of this weekend for you? Freedom.
We're having a barbecue with some family members to celebrate the start of the school year.
You're barbecuing some family members?
Yes, that's what I said.
Wow.
Not having a barbecue with family members. I'm barbecuing family members.
So is that an annual beginning of school tradition? You sacrifice a family member on the barbecue each year?
This is the first annual. So yes.
The first annual family barbecue. Yeah.
Yes.
You know what?
Yes.
I think we might be able to pick up a following. I think we could get that to be a trending topic on TikTok.
Let's not.
Shouldn't the RevOps Show be on TikTok?
No. I've made it this long. I refuse.
I need to get a burner phone so that I can use TikTok.
Doesn't make any sense, but okay.
How does that not make any sense?
Why do you need a burner phone for TikTok?
So that the Chinese don't get my data.
Oh my God. Okay. Sure.
I mean, sure. Do you not read the news, Jess? Do you not know what's going on?
I'm aware. I'm just not going to feed into the paranoia on either side.
So actually, I've talked to enough people that I kind of like. I would have to. I don't. It's not actually.
You don't think it's paranoia?
It's
facts.
No, I think there's some legitimacy.
Wow.
I think there's legitimacy.
Okay.
I mean, I think that it. And it's not that I don't think it's not happening. Like, I'm not on Facebook. That's one of the reasons why I'm not on Facebook.
Yep.
But and I, Lord knows, I certainly don't trust Facebook. I don't trust Twitter. But I don't trust the Chinese government.
Oh, yeah. On that list, it's at the top of things you don't trust.
Yep.
Accurate. It's a good call.
Yep.
Who thought we would have talked about the Chinese government today? Wow. We're off to a good
I
start.
think that's why the podcast is trending so strongly. It's not the content, it's not the deep dives we take into concepts like go-to-market strategy last week. It's everyone's wondering, what are Doug and Jess going to talk about at the beginning?
Is it gonna be baseball? Is it gonna be Disney? Is it gonna be the Chinese government?
And in case anyone can't tell, we've gotten back to being much better at being prepared what we're going to talk about. For those long-time listeners, if you listen real closely, I'm sure you can figure out which episodes we figured out the topic a couple minutes before we started. But I don't think we've ever had a clear, like, this is what the opening.
Oh, no. This is literally just fly by the seat of your pants. Let it go where it takes us.
And I don't even, like, I'm the provocateur on that portion. But I can't think of a time where I knew where I was going to go. All I knew was, actually, when I get on, I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to say Jesse.
That's how you operate every day, all day, is what I thought.
Well, no, that's not quite true. But I understand. That's because I pull off plans with such mastery that it feels like complete improvisation.
Clearly.
All right. What are we talking about this week? My favorite topics. One of my favorite topics.
We're gonna bring back behavioral science.
Gonna bring back? Did it?
We talked about it.
We had behavioral science
to the podcast. Bring behavioral science back to the podcast.
Did it retire or something? Yeah.
Goodness gracious, this is going to be a very focused conversation.
Someone told me yesterday that they had to go out and pick up their car from the mechanic, and I was like, wow, you must be really strong.
Hashtag dad jokes.
Why? Do you know why you should not have sex in elevators?
Why?
It's wrong on so many levels.
But don't forget to tip your bartenders. Okay, so today we're talking about behavioral science. We picked some behavioral science concepts to talk through, and I'd like to.
So if I understand what we did correctly,
yes.
To talk about behavioral science, what we did is we chunked some topics.
We did chunk some topics, which is our first topic, chunking.
Oh my gosh, how about that?
So what is chunking, Doug?
Well, let's take a step back before we get into it. I had to get my punchline in.
You're going to get us back focused? Okay, great.
Kind of share the context. What triggered you to think about behavioral science? Why did you put these topics together? And then...
Yeah. So I was thinking about how decisions are made in the sales process, and another thing we might get into here is also how are decisions made in a tech implementation, because that's kind of the place that I look at things from. And so I chose some behavioral science topics around decision making.
And so I want to add a thread to this.
Okay.
To make it very RevOps focused, not just, which is, we have a tendency whenever we are focused on anything to be focused on first order effects, i.e. what are the effects of the thing that we're working on. But where the impact is second, third, and fourth order effects, right? It's upstream. So every action is preceded by a decision. Now that doesn't mean a decision occurs before every action. To some degree, a habit is one decision that gets repeated multiple times without remaking the decision, right? So it doesn't mean every time I turn on my computer in the morning, did I think and make an active decision? I'm going to turn on my computer now. I would say, no, not really. I've already made that decision. I made that decision earlier. And so when you think about change, if you want somebody to change, and by the way, if you're not getting the utilization of your systems that you want, then you need change. Remember, your system is perfectly designed. for the results and the experience that you have right now. So if you want to change those results and those decisions, you need to change your system. That's the internal focus. The external focus is you need the people involved in your system to change their decisions.
Mm-hmm.
You need to influence their decisions. So when we're thinking about how do we implement for utilization, how do we implement for adoption, how do we manage this, how do we reduce friction, how do we streamline things, what we're really looking at and what we really need to understand is how people make decisions. So it's not just how it influences the ultimate sale, the customer experience, how we go about deciding or doing things related to CRM. It's also how is what we're doing used by and impacts those people that we are supporting and enabling. So I think as we talk about these things, I think you want to be looking at that from a full picture.
Yep.
So before we get into the specifics of this, I also want to repeat, I've shared some of this in other episodes, but I want to talk about decisions just kind of topically. Okay. Did you know, Jess, and I know that you do because I've only asked you this like 10,000 times, did you know that the word decide and the word homicide both have the same Latin meaning? I'm sorry, both have the same Latin root and mean the same thing.
I did.
The Latin root is side and the meaning is to kill, right?
Yep.
Decisions are among the hardest things that people do. Decisions are very taxing. The act of making decisions uses up a lot of calories. So if you want to lose weight, my recommendation is always be deciding. If you know they've hooked people up to brain MRI machines, fMRI machines.
Yeah.
What you find is the biochemical response, the sweat response, the nervous system response to making a decision is the same response as a vigorous workout, when you're in the middle of a vigorous workout. It's the same response as when your life is in danger. There is literally no difference between the taxing on your psychology and physiology between someone pointing a gun at you and you making a decision.
That's crazy.
Right. The reason is when you make a decision, you're killing other options.
Right.
You're killing options, right? You're shutting doors. And so keep in mind, what we will do as humans is we will do everything we can do to avoid making a decision. And we have learned that there are some tricks to maybe make it sound like we've made a decision.
Yep.
Without having made a decision, right? That leads to a lot of miscommunication. But the other thing, and this gets to two of my favorite people in the world. We're actually like all of this stuff we're about to talk about really comes from two of my favorite people in history.
Who are those people?
You don't know who those people are, Jess?
No.
Daniel Kahneman. Hold on one second here. Sorry. Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky.
I'm not placing them.
Yeah, well, Daniel Kahneman, I talk about Daniel Kahneman. Well, I talk about them all the time. Heuristic. I mean, the whole idea of decision heuristics comes from Kahneman and Tversky, and a lot of the experiments on the specific ones that you chose for us to talk about were they originated from Kahneman and or Tversky. So one of the things, so Daniel Kahneman, I think it was Kahneman. It may have been Kahneman and Tversky, coined the term System 1 and System 2 thinking.
Yep.
Right. And so System 1 thinking. So System 1 thinking is fast thinking, right? System 2 thinking is slow thinking. So when we're actually deciding, we're in System 2, right? And System 2 is very taxing. It uses up a lot of energy. Now, keep in mind, remember what I said earlier. Every time you do something, it is preceded by a decision. Right? If you get out of bed this morning, or if you get out of bed tomorrow morning, if you got out of bed this morning, it was preceded by a decision. Now, you probably don't stop and think, do I want to get out of bed? Well, what are the options? Well, if I stay in bed, like you don't do a risk reward analysis, etc. Again, that's a conditioned decision that you've already made, and you go through your habits and so forth. Fun piece of trivia that a lot of people probably know: Steve Jobs always wore the same black turtleneck.
Yep.
Now, technically, it wasn't the same black turtleneck. they wear different black turtlenecks. But do you know why he did that?
So he didn't have to decide what he was going to wear.
Didn't have to decide what he's going to wear.
Yeah.
Right. Barack Obama did the same thing in terms of how he ordered his suit. Like he had a rotation of when he, so that when I got out, I don't have to think about it. So,
One last thing.
What happens is for us to access system 2 thinking, which is when we're fully engaged, aware, conscious, agency, somewhat in control, that's very taxing.
Yep.
What we will do is find cheats to be able to stay in system 1 thinking, right? We would not survive as a species if we didn't have system 1 thinking, because you wouldn't be able, like, you would be lucky to get to the point of your bathroom when you get up in the morning if you actually had to actively make a decision about each thing that you did every time you did it. That's how taxing it would be. So to survive, what we call autopilot. And so what we're going to talk about today are a number of heuristics. I think it's 4 heuristics and 1 item that is a barrier to decisions. But we're going to talk about heuristics, and heuristics are those intuitive leaps that we use to save energy, to save the taxing on our brain so that we can make decisions and take the actions that we need to take during the day. So I want to just kind of give that. And it's important to understand this because I'm actually going to do some comparisons between decisions and software.
Okay.
Decisions and models, right? So I was talking with Noel Free today, and one of the things he started talking about is because he listened to our best of episode on solution architect, and I had mentioned that we confuse the symptom with the problem. We're diagnosing the symptom, not diagnosing the problem. And so he started asking me, like, how do we get to diagnosing the problem? And I didn't have a chance to share this with him yet. You can never actually diagnose the problem. You're never actually at the problem. So one of the things that you understand when you're trying to diagnose a problem, when you're trying to diagnose a cause in a complex system, is you're never actually there. You know what Mark Twain said, don't you?
What?
He said, it's not what you don't know that'll hurt you. It's what you think you know that ain't so.
That ain't so.
And so that's why it's important that you understand this. It's important that you're never there, right? And that's why this isn't set it and forget it type stuff. That's why RevOps is so important. That's why the strategic role of RevOps is so important. Alrighty, with that.
Yep.
Where do we start?
Let's start with chunking. And actually on that point, having read through and done research on these, I do a lot of these without realizing that they were, without like realizing or thinking about them as behavioral science concepts as we're training, executing, that kind of stuff, which I guess is your point around shortcuts.
So by the way, one thing I just want to point out, this is the thing I love about behavioral science. It applies whether you're thinking about it or not.
Yeah. Yep. So let's start with chunking.
Hold on. Remember I was talking about that, that there's nothing redeemable about the show that I started watching. Right. And I mean, that's actually not true. It's funny. It's entertaining. It's a comedy. It's 21 minutes. It's very, like, all that stuff is happening. And so the first night I watched it, I ended up watching till like 2 a.m. I almost watched the entire first season. And the thing that was amazing about it was it had all the elements that cause you to just binge, that cause you to be addicted in the moment. And the thing that was just insane, I knew what was happening. It wasn't that I spent 4 hours watching a show when I should have gone to sleep. Like, I was at the point of, I'm like, let me find a short show. Oh, you know what? I remember hearing something about this. 4 hours later, I finally turned it off, right? I knew what was happening, right? That's what behavioral science is. It's like, guess what? This stuff, it happens whether you realize it or not. Yep. And the reason it's so powerful is it happens because you're not thinking about it. If you were thinking about it, it wouldn't be system 1 thinking.
Wouldn't work. Yep. All right, so let's start with chunking.
Chunking.
So Doug, what is chunking?
So chunking is taking lots of information and grouping it, right? One of the most famous chunking real life situations was the United States for years. Phone numbers, right? Phone numbers were 7 digits.
Yep.
But you didn't remember 7 digits.
Yep.
You remembered 3 digits and you remember 4 digits. We've gone to 10 digits. People don't remember phone numbers anywhere near as much. But even at 10 digits, we still don't remember 10 digits. We remember 3 digits.
3, 4. Yep.
And actually, we don't even remember that. we remember 1 digit, 3 digits, and 4 digits. We remember the digit, and think about it. You remember the area codes that you call regularly.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, your area code now is 210, right?
Yeah, and I'm in a city that still only has 1 area code, but I grew up in a city that had multiple.
But wasn't your mobile phone, wasn't it 669 before?
469. Yeah.
469, okay.
Yeah.
Right. By the way, I've always been really good at remembering phone numbers. Like, I've had a bizarre way to remember phone numbers, but I never actually remember the numbers.
Yeah.
Do you know what I remembered?
What?
The pattern on
on
the touchpad. It's like, oh, it's this. Right? And so it's funny, right? When I dial a phone, I can do it very intuitively.
Yeah.
But when I'm on VoIP, I struggle. Do you know why?
Because you don't have the visual of it. Yeah.
No, I have the keypad. I have a keypad. Right. On a phone, 1, 2, 3 is the top row. On a keyboard, 1, 2, 3 is the bottom row. It's not the same pattern.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Here's another example. Chess players, chess masters, chess grandmasters thought at one time that one of the elements was they just had photographic memories because they could pick up a game. You could show them a board at any point in a game and they would be able to tell you what happened before, what, right. And so everyone thought, oh, they just have didactic memories. Well, then they did an experiment and they started doing just random placements of chess pieces. And the grandmasters had memories every bit as bad as average players. What they found was that chess players chunk the board.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like there's 4 to 6 chunks of the board. And so they're just seeing the pattern in these 4 to 6 chunks. They're not actually looking at the pieces. So here's what chunking is. Jess, have you ever seen the show Silicon Valley?
I have.
And what did Pied Piper create?
What is it? Middle out compression.
Compression. It was a compression algorithm.
Yes.
Right. Now, what made Pied Piper's compression algorithm so powerful was it was lossless.
Right.
Okay. There is no such thing as lossless compression. So for those of you that don't know, basic compression. So like I have an MP3. I take a song, I put it on MP3. An MP3 is a compression.
Right. Yep.
And so what it does as an example is, it's a binary language, so it's all zeros and ones. And so in its coding, if it's 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, what it'll do is it'll compress that from 6 bytes to 2 because it'll give a code that's like 6 ones. So it knows that the next 6 digits are ones. So here's the thing. When you use compression software in things like I'm listening to a song on my iPhone, my computer, whatever, it's fine. Right? I want to get the music faster. I want to watch whatever faster. It's fine. Right? So the vast majority of the times it finds it works good enough. But are you hearing what was supposed to be heard? You are not.
I was going to say, according to my husband, who's a musicphile, I am not.
You're not.
Yeah.
You're not. You're missing out on the highest highs, the lowest lows. You're missing out on, like, one of the things it'll do is, like, if we go high, if there's a lot of variance in it, it normalizes it. So you'll so it softens what's there. Now we get into digital, which is precise versus analog, which is not precise. So you miss some of the, like all of those things are true. Now, far more often than not, we can look at people like your husband and go, yeah, okay, whatever. Right?
That's
Because
what I do.
Because the truth of the matter is, with some exceptions, most of us don't have an ear talented enough to be able to tell the difference anyways.
Yep.
And hey, you know what? I'm listening to music while I'm working, so I'm actually not listening to it to pick up the specific nuance. I saw a show, it was an investigator figuring this out, and there was, because someone had been accused of a crime that they didn't commit. And because the video had been compressed, there was a frame or two that got skipped, and it was in that skipped frame. So like the climax of the show is the investigator asking for the source of the video so they could look, because they identified that there were frames that were skipped, right? And so that's what we're doing with chunking, is we're skipping frames.
Yep.
Right. We're compressing things together to get a general sense of, right? And I would say we wouldn't be able to survive if we didn't chunk. Chunking far more often than not is helpful. By the way, if we're trying to teach somebody something new, don't teach them everything. Chunk it. Yep. Make it, categorize it. That, by the way, that's why acronyms work. That's why I could remember how to spell Adidas, even though it was technically pronounced Adidas. But it was pronounced, like if we had pronounced it Adidas, all of a sudden, All Day I Dream About doesn't work. Right. And okay. So as we're thinking about it, realize if you want people to really pick up and be able to hold on to it, we can only process so much, chunk it. But also be aware when you're chunking it, both as the person chunking or doing it, what are we losing in that? Again, 98, probably 99% of the time, it's fine. You should, like, that's what you should do. As a matter of fact, if you try to look up the downside of chunking, there's not a lot of content on the downside of chunking.
Yeah.
Right. But you are losing the nuance. When you chunk, you are losing the nuance. And so when you're making bigger decisions, when they're more critical, then, be aware your natural approach is to chunk.
Yep.
And by the way, kind of a subset of chunking is substitution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We hear this, and so we interpret it as something else, and then we chunk it. And now we're 3 or 4 degrees away from where we really were, and we think we're saying the same thing, and then things, right? Yep. Those are all the things that are going on. Learn how to so chunking reduces friction.
Okay.
Right?
That makes sense. Yeah.
So if you want someone to do something, chunk it. If you want someone not to do something, don't chunk it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. All right. That's actually a nice segue into decision fatigue. That if you want somebody to not do something, don't chunk it. So, what's decision fatigue, Doug?
So I actually believe that the human mind is only capable of making a certain number of decisions in their life.
You and I have talked about this.
I think that's when you die. Right. I think when you've used up your lifetime decision allocation, you die. But that's not what we're talking about, decision fatigue. Decisions suck up energy.
Mm-hmm.
You expend a lot. Every time you make a decision, it takes something out of you. So every decision you make through a day gets harder to make.
Yep.
As you get to a certain point, now you and I have talked about this specifically, and I believe this firmly, that every person has a capacity of decisions that they're able to make in a day. And once you go over that by like one, things blow up. And that's why we get into arguments with our friends' spouses about the smallest things.
No, I've legit at the end of a day told Juan, look, I hit my decision threshold today. I'm done. Like you need to make all the decisions for the rest of the day. I can't do it.
We were at one of our kids' soccer games. It was like 11:32. It was Danny asking me, do I want to go here or here for lunch? And I was like, by the way, I hadn't made a whole bunch of decisions during the day. Okay. But I was like, why the fuck are you asking me? can't you just, and look, it was a total overreaction on my part. It was ridiculous, but it was also like, look, you know what? I can't even count how many decisions I make during the week. I don't want to make a decision, right? And that's not a cop out. That's like a legitimate thing. Now, I will
Right.
say, if you want to increase your decision capacity, one of the things you have to do is you have to make more decisions, right? It's
Yeah.
like lifting weights, right? It really is. But just like lifting weights, if you overtrain, you will break things. You will hurt yourself. So decision fatigue is what happens progressively over making decisions, right? And so one of the things to do, by the way, why is Apple such a powerful company? What has been the key to their success in design? They subtract.
Mm-hmm.
Apple took out the floppy disk. They took out the CD drive. They took out flash. On each one of those, people said, "Oh, no. People are going to revolt. You're taking choice away. You're taking choice away."
Yep.
Right. So what Apple does for you is they make it so that you don't have to make decisions. By the way, that's what point of view is. That's what point of view software is we're making decisions for you. So it becomes easier, right?
Yeah.
So one thing is, how can we make the decisions for you? By the way, here again, reduce the friction. Now, if it's a good piece of point of view software, the point of view doesn't prevent me from doing it differently, but it means I have to go out of my way to do it differently, which means it's very unlikely that that's going to happen.
Right.
Right. The reason that so many people have the percentage pipelines, for at each stage that they have, is because the first CRM that did it, that was the default percentages. And people said, oh, well, there you go. There's right. It would have been a lot harder to actually figure that out. Here's another thing. I hear a lot of people go, well, you know what? My boss doesn't listen to me, or, we need a seat at the table, whatever the case may be. Right. Don't ask higher ups. If you're in RevOps and you've got important decisions, don't talk to key people at 3:00, 4:00, or 5:00.
Yeah. No
right?
joke. Yeah.
Right. You want them, if you're looking, like, if you want their attention, you want that, have the first thing in the morning meeting, get the earliest time, right?
Yep.
I want to be the first decision you make today. I mean, don't say that out loud, right? But you'll find that you'll be heard differently. But by the way, they've done studies on this as well. If you take a look at judgments and sentences, you're more likely to be acquitted earlier in the day or have a lighter sentence. Also, you're in the morning and right after lunch, right? So, like, understand your boss's calendar, understand your board's calendar, understand whoever you're talking to, what their calendar is. If you're going to ask them to really do something where you need them to think, take a look at it, take a look at what's happening, and ask, have they had a break?
Yep.
Right. And when they say, no, you know what? I'll tell you what. I've got 20 minutes before lunch. Let's meet then. Oh, no, that's okay. I'm telling you, if it's an important decision, you're better off to have the meeting delayed by a week to meet them at 9:00 than just before lunch.
Well, yeah. And when I was able to crack that code like that, that's how I was able to move up, accelerate. And particularly even in a client situation, I frequently say to them, do we really think we can have this productive conversation here, or would we be better? And you're slowing down to go faster, essentially. Yeah,
well, the
I
other
agree.
thing too is, why is lunch such a powerful thing? Like, why is before lunch bad? Like, just before lunch bad?
Oh, because they're hungry. They're hungry and they're ready to get off. So you are standing between them and lunch. Like, they're in a rush.
So decisions take up energy.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do at lunch?
Re-energize. Fuel up.
Eat, which right?
Yeah.
And there was a break.
Yep.
So there's at least a little bit of rejuvenation.
Yep.
Right. So you've got that. Right. And so that's, understand that's real. By the way, don't make your big proposal the last thing of the day.
Exactly. The other thing that I do around decision fatigue is I've learned that coming with a recommendation, if you do have a way, like enough information to make a recommendation, versus asking, for options from them and asking them to kind of give you a list of items is far more effective, because you're now like, they're not having to think as much around it.
And we're going to connect to that in some of the next ones you talk about.
Yep. So next one I want to talk about is decision staging, which is really around complex or long decisions.
So if you're involved in a complex decision, and that means if you're dealing with any kind of high value, high impact sale, or you're managing systems, you are dealing with complex decisions. And so what I'm going to tell you is decision staging is the game. The most common mistake that gets made is there is no defined staging. And so what ends up happening, and just listen to your sales conversations, go back and listen to the presentations that you made to the board. And what you'll find is you ask questions, they answer the questions. You ask a question, they answer a question. You go, oh yeah, that's why we want to do X. What you're doing is everything's all over the place. And then you say, okay, here's what we recommend. What do you want to do? So here's an example. It's very common in the sales world. Here's an example of a decision staging heuristic or decision staging framework. Why change? Why change now? Why change with you? Right. So the first thing I want to do, my first job in a sales interaction, and by the way, if I want to implement a new process from RevOps, my first thing is I need to get you to make the decision about we need a change. Now, think about it. When you're telling me change is scary, right? So if you're asking me to change at the same time you're telling me what we should change to, well, what you're changing to is scary. And by the way, I've in essence skipped the decision.
Yep.
Right. Which makes the decision tax even higher. But I'm also going to pick at the solution.
Yep.
I'm going to pick at the recommendation. Right. Well, the reality is I'm picking at the recommendation because that's more tangible. The real issue is I haven't made the decision to change yet.
Yep.
So hey, Jess, do you understand? Like this is why we need to change this. And you go, well, Doug, what are we going to do instead? And I go, Jess, candidly, right now, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. But do we agree that we need to change? Okay. Then the next thing is, do we need to change now?
Right.
What's the urgency of this?
Mm-hmm.
Then, okay, why should we do this? Why should you buy from me?
Right.
But what happens is we never stage those decisions in a sales interaction. We never stage those decisions. And at the end, we deliver the proposal, which has a change now with you all built in. So you start getting objections, but the objection isn't about you. It's about the change, but it's also the fatigue of it.
Yep.
Right. It's too much. So the reason it drives what I call decision reluctance. Decision reluctance is the fear of making a decision.
Yep.
And what drives fear is when you skip steps, when you skip stages. So decision staging is the game. Because when you stage the decision well, all of a sudden decisions become a lot easier. Because you never have to make a big decision. Right? Once you've agreed we need to change, I don't have to make the change argument anymore. We don't have to talk about the change argument anymore. Right?
Yep.
So now all of a sudden I'm not defending the status quo. Now, if you stage the decision wrong, then it doesn't matter what, right? So decision staging is the highest leverage to make decisions and to influence decisions.
I agree. All right. So next I want to talk about elimination by aspects. I do this all the time.
Yeah. The elimination by aspects, like this is a really funky one. Yeah,
why do you say that?
Because what you're doing, so let me tell you a story.
Okay.
I for a very brief period of time in my life, I did real estate. I was a real estate agent.
Yep.
And one of the things that I saw that happened very frequently is an agent would take somebody out, show them homes. This was before Zillow, everybody. I lived in a world that didn't have the internet. I'd say I sold in a world that didn't have the internet. Yes, I'm old. And you'd go out during the day and you'd see 6 to 8, 10 houses. Now, first off, let's go back to what we talked about earlier. Now, all of a sudden, I'm trying to remember 10 different houses. How can I remember all that? But here's what would happen. Well, I really like the kitchen of the third home. The backyard of the first home was great. but I hated the master bedroom.
Yeah.
The great room of the 7th house.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so if I hear you correctly, you want the backyard of the 1st house, the kitchen of the 3rd house, the great room of the 7th house, the master bedroom of the 5th house, the community and schools of the house we haven't looked at yet.
Right.
I don't think I can do that. Right. So one of the things that I would do is I would show you house 1.
Mm-hmm.
And I would give you like the listing.
Yep.
Like, okay, here's house 1. Let me go. Well, hey, do you like it? By the way, they might go. I would oftentimes, the first house I would show was oftentimes one that I knew that they wouldn't really like.
Right.
Because, by the way, you learn a lot in what somebody doesn't like.
Yep.
So I go, did you like the house? Yeah, it was okay. Is it one that you'd want to consider?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, or yes. And if they said no, I said, okay, great, give me that. And I would crumble it up. Because, by the way, I would see that someone would say, no, I wouldn't consider that house. But it would still come up later that, well, I really like the laundry room of the first house. Yeah. They wouldn't consider.
Right.
So I would take the listing, I would crumple it up. But let's say that the first house was in consideration. I would show them the second house. So what do you think about that? Is it a house that you would consider? Yeah. Okay. Which one do you prefer? Do you prefer the first house or the second house?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I like this or the first. No, I get it. Right. It would be great if we can combine them. We can't. If these were the only 2 houses you could choose from, which one would you choose? I would take the second. I'd say, okay, give me the first listing. I'd crumple it up, throw it in the back seat.
Yeah.
It never took me more than 4 houses.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It never took me more than 5 houses. I meant to say 5. I don't know why 4 came out. So this is why it's funky. Now, we did do some elimination by aspect because the first thing that I did was, what can you afford?
Right. Yeah.
Right? So you can afford a $300,000 house. I'm not going to show you $1 million house. I'm going to take that out. What type of house? Are we looking at a condo? Are we looking at, right? What communities? Kind of what was important. So maybe you had elementary school kids and so the school system was super, super important. Like, so we would do some of those things. And that's what elimination by aspect is you're basically narrowing down by attributes.
Yep.
Theoretically, it works when you're narrowing down by the most important attribute first, and then the next most important, and the next most important. But this is where the convenience bias or the convenience heuristic or the substitution heuristic comes in. Is what oftentimes happens is you actually eliminate by the simplest or easiest aspect.
Right.
Rather than the most important. Right. And then the other aspect of it that makes it really funky and I think it's actually, it's going to happen. You need to think about how you're doing it. And that's why this is what I refer to as framing the decision. These types of things that we're talking about go into framing the decision that we're making here, framing my case, building my case. Because you're going to eliminate by aspect. So I need to guide what you're going to eliminate by aspect from. Because the other difficulty with it is elimination by aspect works when the attributes are independent.
Yep. Gotcha.
It doesn't work when they're dependent or even worse, interdependent.
Right.
So like if I've eliminated this community for whatever reason, right? There might be elements about there that when you actually looked at the 3rd, 4th, and 5th elements, even though it got ruled out by the first, those 3rd, 4th, and 5ths would actually be more important than the first because by the way, once you rule it out, it's ruled out. Whether it's ruled out by 1%, it didn't meet my criteria by 1% or by 100%. And so that the complexity of decisions, and this is why CRM implementations get so screwed up, is because they eliminate by aspect.
Yeah.
Look, we just needed to have the data about right, and you've eliminated the. And by the way, let's say you've eliminated the keys that drive adoption and utilization.
Yeah.
So let's say that you eliminate by something that is clearly very important. What can you afford?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you eliminate because of cost. But what is cost? Right? Because what's the cost of it not working?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
What is right? And so if you look at what we do, and I actually think this is some of the magic of why our implementations work the way they do, is in how we manage the business process. We're chunking, We're ordering decisions. We're identifying key areas and clear areas of elimination. So all that noise and static doesn't get in the way of the ability to move forward.
Yep, makes sense. So last piece that I want to talk about is decision inertia, which I think is one of the ones you were referencing would feed into what we've talked about already. That's the stable state associated with inaction and the concept of status quo bias. So,
there's another word for decision inertia.
What's that?
Inertia. So another heuristic, another bias is the omission bias, right?
Mm-hmm.
We take this route to work every day.
Yep.
One day we decide, hey, you know what? I want to mix things up. I'm going to go this way. I'm going to go a different way today.
Yep.
And it turns out traffic ends up being really bad.
Yep.
And you miss your meeting. And your boss yells at you. And you go, why, today of all days, did I choose this route?
Mm-hmm.
Right? You blame yourself for that.
Right.
It makes all the sense in the world. Instead, you you didn't go a different way.
Yep.
And there turned out to be unexpected traffic.
Mm-hmm.
And you missed your meeting. And you get yelled at your boss. Do you think, why, on today of all days, did I not take a different route?
No.
Right?
No.
Right. We assume, we have a tendency to attribute the decision as the cause, right?
Yeah.
Here's another example of decision inertia. So we're going to play Let's Make a Deal. Jess, I want you to choose. Do you want what's behind door number 1, door number 2, or door number 3?
I have to pick one.
Do you want the prize behind? There's $1 million behind door number 1. There's a goat with hay behind door number 2. And there is every edition of the New York Times from 1950 to 1990 behind door number 3. Those are your choices. You got to pick. Behind door number 1, door number 2, door number 3.
Door number 1.
Door number 1?
Yes.
So now I show you, I open up door number 3.
Uh-huh.
Door number 3 is all of the newspapers.
Yep.
And now I say to you, Jess, I'm going to give you a choice right now. You can change your pick to door number 2, or you can stick with door number 1. Which do you want?
Door number 1.
Right. Do you know that is a mistake?
Why is that a mistake?
Because you just reduced the chances of winning $1 million.
How?
Yep. This is my favorite behavioral science.
I feel like we've had this conversation before, and I don't remember how it ended. Okay.
We have. And that's why I was like, you might get it right because you remember it, but this shows you how powerful it is, right? So if I give you 3 choices, one of them has $1 million, what's your chance of success? What's your chance that you're going to pick right?
1 in 3.
33%.
Yes.
Right. If I give you 2 choices, what are your chances of being right?
50%.
Right. So you're sticking with the 33% choice instead of changing to the 50% choice.
But I know there's $1 million between door number 1.
No, you don't.
Why? Because you haven't opened it yet?
Right. Right. Okay. So by the way, this behavioral economic was behind Let's Make a Deal.
Yep.
And behind Deal or No Deal. Right. Remember, as you got to the end, you had the choice. You could trade your suitcase.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And there, I think you had you started off with 32.
The banker would make you would give you a dollar amount that you could, if you give up your suitcase.
Yeah. No. That was to leave. At the end, you could say, so there's 2
so you
suitcases.
could switch. Yeah.
You could switch suitcases. So when you started off and you picked the suitcase first, you had a 1 in 32 chance of being right.
Yeah.
The suitcase that you can choose now has a 50% chance of being right. You're sticking with your 1 in 32 chance of being right. This is mathematically unassailable. It is the smart decision to change your suitcase. It is the smart decision for you to choose door number 2. Now, here's the thing. This is decision inertia. Right?
Yep.
if you changed to door number 2 and it turned out to be the goat,
Yep.
you would be like, oh my God, why did I do that?
Yeah.
Why did I do that? Right. And everyone watching would go, what an idiot. She had picked the right door.
Right.
Right. Now, what if in sticking with door number 1, it was the goat? You would say,
You're not mad. Yeah.
nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Yep.
Right.
Because you never had it. You didn't lose it.
Right. Well, remember one of my rules in life is you can't lose what you don't have.
Yes, it's true.
Right? But there's a couple other heuristics that play into that, but that is decision inertia. The aspect of drawing another decision, right? So remember, you picked 1 where you could have picked 1, 2, or 3, and now 2, like, because by the way, if it was behind door number 2 and you had picked door number 3, I would have shown you door number 1.
Right.
So whatever door I showed you, right? This is why it is logically the wrong decision, but an extraordinarily small percentage of people will make the right decision. And by the way, if you change the door, well, I had a better chance of being right.
Yeah.
But if it was off, everyone would call you stupid.
Yep.
That's the taxation of making a decision. That is why making a new decision is so important. So if I were to, so how do I overcome decision inertia? Actually, I think this came up on in our AMA. I said, don't ask somebody to change their decision. See, like, I'm asking you to change your decision here, sort of.
Right. Yep.
If I had recrafted it, so that it was a whole new situation, you would be far more willing, and you would probably understand. Like, if I had said, okay, in your first chance, right now you have 1 out of 2. Like, you have no issue to say that your first choice you had a 1 in 3 chance of being right.
Right.
In your second situation, you had a 1 of 2 chance being right. Now, here's where we get to the key, and here's where we get to decision inertia. For you to choose door number 2, you feel like you have to make another decision.
Right.
But if you stay with door number 1, you're not making a decision. But in reality, you did make a decision. When I said you can change to door number 2, you said, no, I decide door number 1, but it didn't feel like a decision. And because that was harder, and by the way, realize this, let's make a deal, and deal or no deal, they knew mathematically giving you that option was bad for them. That was bad for the house, right? But that's the power of decision inertia.
Yep. Which also goes back to staging. Cool. I thought this was super interesting. I have a couple of takeaways. So I like what you said around, if you want people to make a decision, chunk it. If you don't. I hadn't actually thought about chunking that way. It's interesting. Staging decisions is key. So starting with, should there even be a change? Does the change need to happen now? And then the proposed solution, skipping those stages.
And by the way, that's an example of a very common state, but think about what are the order of decisions that you want somebody to make. So remember, going back to our CRM implementation, we decide on, are we selling only to new people, or are we selling to new and existing customers? Right. So we're ordering the decision differently than,
and breaking it up into bite-sized pieces is kind of how I was thinking about it. And then you need to take these things.
What else? You know what else? We're asking you to make decisions about your status quo before we're asking you to make decisions about the change.
Yep. And then lastly, just taking all these things into account helps you frame that decision up better and kind of guide the person to help them be able to get to a decision. So
there you go.
Yeah. And remember, everybody, just say no to shitty RevOps.
I thought I was supposed to say that.
Are you going to say it? Go ahead. You can say it.
What's going on, Jess? What are you taking my, what?
Go ahead, Doug. You say it.
Just say no to shitty RevOps.
Till next time.
What a plot twist that Jess said the outro before Doug. Anywho, that is a wrap on this episode of the RevOps Show. Whether you know it or not, you're probably dealing with these decision-making behavioral science concepts on a day-to-day basis. That's the one thing I love about behavior science, is that we sometimes don't even know what's going on until we figure out what's going on. Anyways, that's just what I love most about behavioral science. I geek out a little bit too hard about it sometimes. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to go subscribe on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you happen to listen to us. We'd also appreciate a review or sharing our episode. We love reading what you all have to say and seeing the show get shared around. And if you have any questions you would like to ask Doug or Jess about these behavioral science topics, email me at hannah@liftenablement.com or hit us up on formerly Twitter, now X, @demandcreator. Until next time, just say no to shitty RevOps.